core of what it means to run for student member of the board, making sure, we're getting the questions that the people want answered and really listening to the constituents.
Hello, I'm Jason Maxine of Moco, and today we have Sami Saeed, the current Montgomery County student member of the board, helping me to interview SMOB Finalist Praneel Suvarna. So you guys want to say hello?
Yeah, I can go ahead. Like Jason said, Sami Saeed, current student member of the board. I got a few months left in my term. It's been a fantastic year. And I know Jason here with Moderately Moco has really helped me throughout my term. I'll report on a number of things, namely my safety resolutions. So I really appreciate that. I'm forever indebted to you. So, I'm coming here today we're interviewing both finalists, but today's Praneel. So Praneel, you want to go ahead and say a couple words?
Yeah, so I just want to start off by saying thank you guys so much for this opportunity to be interviewed. I think this is like the core of what it means to run for student member of the board, making sure, we're getting the questions that the people want answered and really listening to the constituents. So just a little bit about me. My name is Praneel. I'm a junior at Clarksburg High School. Past this, I've been in MCPS my whole life. I've been to 6 different MCPS schools. On top of that, I've also held an elected position at the countywide level as the MCR. So that's the Montgomery County Regional Student Government Association Vice President. So I've held that since around last April. Alongside this, I've also been the class president for the past 3 years. I think we'll keep it to that for the introductions, and I'll let you guys sort of get into the questions and we'll answer some more about my background through that.
Okay, great. So I'm going to start out with kind of the shorter questions, and they'll get longer questions as we go on. So the first one is, do you support reinstating final exams?
Do I support reinstating final exams? So I would not support reinstating final exams. I think, MCPS has made a sort of decision to not have final exams as a way to sort of limit student stress. But what I will say is I'm also a dual enrolled student at MC. So I have taken final exams before. And I can say that they are stressful. But if students want to have that option for, like I know obviously now like AP exams could be considered like a sort of final exam in some levels of courses. But if students do want to get that sort of extra credit, MC courses are a great way to do that, and they do have final exams. So I'd say, maybe not for the typical like high school classes, but for MC and AP classes, having that AP exam be considered like a final exam, or like the MC classes, leaving them to their own class structure. I think they've done a really good job with that. And it's a great way for students to be able to manage it themselves, be like, hey, I know what I'm going to be able to get myself into when I'm taking this course. I know it has a final exam, so let me just stay ahead of that right now.
Okay, great. I think it's a great answer. So do you support or do you favor the 50% rule, or what are your thoughts on it? I know we had some movement in the middle of the year on this as well.
So here's what I'll say. I'll say personally, the 50% rule has saved me a couple of times. I think, when we're talking about grades in Montgomery County, it definitely does make them a little bit softer. And it does make us a little bit less competitive as a county. But the fact that we've already instated it means that, if we're going to move towards any other policy, number one thing that we need is clear communication so that students know what's happening. And the number two thing is that we're giving students the resources to handle any sort of changes. Personally, I am in favor of this 50% rule. I know that's a little bit of a controversial opinion, but it's just for me personally as a student, I've seen it benefit me, especially in some high level courses. But I can understand where this course would lie in not wanting that rule to be in place for the rest of the year or for future years.
Okay, great. Do you support a required financial literacy course?
I think that this is a great idea. And I think the number one thing that we need to talk about when requiring a financial literacy course, I think that is a great idea. I think we need to first talk about the standardization of financial literacy courses across the county, right? So we have quantitative literacy and we have a financial literacy at some schools, and the course codes are not the same, right? So first we need to look across all schools and see what exactly is being taught in each of these courses, standardize that, and then look at seeing hey, if we're going to standardize this, what other graduation requirement are we maybe potentially getting rid of, or are we looking back at it and saying, like, I know we recently switched to a full year of health, and that's been a controversial opinion. I know that was also mandated by the State Board of Education too, so it's not something Moco can specifically do anything about. But it is really important that, we're preparing our students for success. And a big part of that is, making sure that their success is going to be successful money-wise too.
Okay. Do you support SROs/CEOs being in schools?
Okay, so I think SROs is school resource officers, CEOs is community engagement officers. Just for clarification, so SROs, the police members, I'm not fully on board with that idea. I think that oftentimes they can cause a lot of strife within schools, and students will feel very uncomfortable. CEOs, I think, are a little bit more of a better policy that we're kind of adapting to right now. But I think the number one thing that we need to talk about when when we're talking about any sort of police presence within our schools, is making sure that students know and they're comfortable with it, right? Student safety is obviously a number one priority, but when we're talking about students' education, they can't do that when they're uncomfortable within our schools. So when we're talking about these SROs or CEOs being present, number one, I think there needs to be an open community discourse with these police officers or these SRO CEOs within schools, so that students know who they are, first of all. And then there also needs to be there needs to be like sort of like a gradual, like incremental sort of approach to this idea too. Like we shouldn't just be putting police officers in all of our schools all at once without actually talking to the students and looking at that first. Because we've also seen in the past, when we put police officers in schools, the disproportionate rates of targeting of Black and brown and minority students. And I think, again, it's really important to understand the impacts that these police officers, SRO, CEOs will have on our students, especially our minority communities, because that's something that we really need to take into consideration when we're talking about any sort of these measures or policies being implemented.
Okay, thank you. And this next question is about boundary studies. Rank the following factors to look at in terms of importance when discussing boundary studies. Now, these are the 4 factors that the county provides. So there's other factors as well, but they are utilization, diversity, proximity, and assignment stability.
Okay. You mind if I write that down real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, so you said utilization,
which is like the percent of students
going to school.
They're
like
there
the
versus
like
how many the
80%
school's built for.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Utilization, diversity,
Mhm.
pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Proximity, how close you are to the school, and then assignment stability, which is like, okay, they just switched school assignments 2 years ago, 4 years ago. How soon can we switch them again?
Okay. Yeah. So I'll speak on this with my personal experience first. With boundary studies. So me personally, I live in the Clarksburg area, so I go to Clarksburg High School. So when we're talking about boundaries in Clarksburg, I know my very close friends who are zoned there's one street, it's called it's right off Morningstar, and it's literally split down the center, and both of them are like extremely close to Clarksburg High School, but one of them is zoned into Damascus, the other one is zoned into Clarksburg. So I personally have had that experience with boundaries, right? Seeing that, I think when we're talking about boundary studies, I think give me a second, because like when we're talking about like ranking this, I think proximity is an important factor, but we also have to consider diversity in school education. So I would have to say, let's go proximity, diversity, utilization, assignment stability. But I just want to explain that real quickly. I'm going to say diversity because personally going to Clarksburg has been such an important experience for me, because it's been such a diverse community, being able to, have access and like learn about all the different cultures around me through different things like the BSU Minority Scholars Program, Notch, which is like one of our Indian dance teams. Like it's a great experience to have all that cultural diversity within our school. And I've been to other schools across the county that don't have that. And it's very much a drastic change. I was at Cabin John today, and they had to have a sort of PSA about, hate movements within the school, like students having sort of different hate comments being directed towards different sixth graders. And I think having diversity within our school is a great step in order to, stop that from an early age, to give students the sort of background that they need to really ensure that they know like what's appropriate, what's not, and to learn more about different cultures within schools. So that's why I would put sort of diversity second. Proximity, obviously, it's really important to go to a school that's close to you. I have friends in the magnet program at Richard Montgomery, right, who will have to wake up at 5:30 in the morning to go to catch the bus. And then they'll come back at like 3:30 in the afternoon. If they're not taking any extracurriculars. And that was an option that they chose. But if a student was forced into that, like that's a lot of burden to put on a student to be busing them like that. I'm lucky enough to live almost just 2 minutes away from Clarksburg High School. So I have the ability to do my extracurriculars, come back home easily. But that's not the case for a lot of students. So again, when we're talking about students' education, proximity has to be an important factor to when we consider the ability to do extracurriculars and to, just be able to participate in school to their fullest extent. Because if you're wasting all your time traveling, how's that going to help you when you're talking about education? And then I put utilization third. I think it's important that when we consider utilization, but I think with 26 now, depending on how you dice it, 27 including Woodward, like next year with Northwood dropping, and then Crown after that, it's gonna be MCPS will have the ability to sort of reassign schools based upon utilization. But I think it's important that we get the sort of educational side of it out first. And I think that's, again, really, really important. And then I got finally like assignment stability. This is going to be an ongoing process. This is going to be something that we're going to have to change. But the idea is if we can get it right once, we can keep it right until we need to fix it again, right? So the idea is let's do it right the first time and then not have to, keep trying to fix it incrementally in future iterations. So I think that's sort of my my thought process behind those decisions.
Okay, great. And thanks for a very detailed explanation there.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're moving on to a section about MCPS discipline. Do you think MCPS gives teachers and admin the ability to effectively discipline students?
I'm gonna say no here. I think when we're talking about discipline, it's definitely like an ongoing struggle within our school, especially post-COVID. I think there's a lot of things that the school system favors students for, and it makes it harder for teachers to discipline students. But I think in the future, what we can look at is my personal platform goal is to, introduce more restorative justice specialists into schools, right? Because that's a system that MCPS tries to use, but it doesn't always work the way that's supposed to. So when we're talking about trying to use restorative justice, we need to make sure that we're doing it right in order to make sure students are being disciplined appropriately and teachers have the tools that they need to maintain a classroom appropriately, and also make sure that, when we're talking about like the entire a school culture, it's being set up in the right way.
Okay, it's like you're reading my notes, because my next question is, what do you think is and isn't working as far as restorative justice and MCPS? So I don't know if you want to add anything or just go with the last.
Yeah, so I think oftentimes it's kind of used as sort of like, I don't know. I would say sometimes it's not used appropriately, in the sense that it's sort of used as a way to just sort of let students off the hook sometimes. And I think a lot of students have expressed that to me on their school visits. They said like, oh, like it's restorative justice, so nobody gets punished, right? But that's not what restorative justice is supposed to be. It's supposed to be, teaching students how to do better in the future. And I think by implementing these restorative justice specialists at all middle and high schools across the county, which is something, Sammy, I know that you've been pushing for, the Board of Education has been pushing for, something I want to continue, but just making sure that, we're really giving the teachers, the admin, the schools, the resources to be able to go talk to these students and say, hey, what you did was wrong. Here's how you can fix this in the future, and just don't let us catch you doing it again, right? And really making sure that, that there's a level of strictness that's being enforced with it, but also students know, hey, like this wasn't right. I won't do it again in the future, which is not really being implemented as well as it could be right now.
Okay. All right, so next question is, in our research of Montgomery County hate bias incidence reports from a 16-month period ending last year in October 2023, 61% of all hate bias incidents in schools targeted Jews. What do you think should be done about the rise of anti-Semitism and other hate in MCPS?
So I think number one is to assemble an anti-hate task force within MCPS, comprised of students from all different ethnic backgrounds and religions, just to show, like, what we're talking about, these are reported incidents, right? What are the number of incidents that aren't being reported that are happening within our schools? That's something that we also have to consider too. I think specifically making sure that we're teaching our students that this is not okay. Again, it kind of goes back to this restorative justice practices. And I think it starts from the ground up, making sure that within our courses in our schools, we're having diverse courses, so that we're talking about people of all ethnic backgrounds, to really like ensure, like, hey, like when you're talking and talk about like how it affects someone when you maybe say something hateful or have hate bias towards someone. I know recently Sammy's brought us on to an anti-hate bias video group. So we're planning on doing a sort of video series on just, the ways that hate bias incidents will affect students within the county. That's something that I'm, again, really looking forward to being able to show students that, this is not something that you just say, right? It's something that actually affects someone on the inside. And I think, again, I'm going to reference back to Cap and John where I was earlier today, but they were talking about this, and the AP, Mr. Lee, was talking about this, and he was saying when he was in middle school, right? And I think I definitely have the same experience, but you would hear a hate bias incident and you sort of just like laugh it off, shrug it off with the rest of everyone, and nobody would know like how much it's actually affecting you until like years down the line. And I think it's important to teach students to stand up for themselves and say, hey, like, I did not feel comfortable with that, to go report it to an adult, report it to an admin, make sure that these incidents are still being heard, and then going back to MCPS and saying, hey, look at the number of students that are feeling unsafe in our schools right now. What can we do to fix this? And talking to the students and saying, hey, what would you guys want to do to fix this? Talking to the parents and saying, hey, what would you guys want to do to fix this? And really getting all the key stakeholder input in order to make sure that when we're making these decisions, we're bringing everyone in the loop and we're making the decisions that are best for the community.
Okay, cool. And yeah, if you want my help, Sammy, when you're working on this, task force or whatever it was, just let me know. So, all right. So next question, fentanyl deaths and ODs among teens has risen in recent years. What is your suggestions of how MCPS can deal with this growing epidemic?
Yeah, so this is something that was a really big issue to me last year, right? Last year I was also on the campaign trail running against Sammy. I didn't make it as far, but what did really stick out to me is like wanting to create that sense of action. So I partnered with an organization called Tree of Hope at that time. And I raised over $100 just to sort of kickstart a program of peer-to-peer recovery in students that are on the verge of addiction or who are already addicted to drugs. And then that was something that I did right at that moment. When I was elected vice president of MCR, the number one thing I pushed for was a drug and opioid task force. And it's a first of its kind task force within MCR. I previously had served on an environmental task force, so I had seen firsthand the ability that these task forces were able to do, the impact that these task forces were able to create. So that's run by some amazing people, Jackson Taylor and Millie. I can't remember her last name, but Jackson actually just recently testified at the state board, at the state house in Annapolis, on a bill that would require Narcan in schools. Something that again, I think is really important. Making sure that we're not only educating students, but giving them the resources to fight back against this epidemic. And they were also able to, as a task force in conjunction with MCR, they were able to train over 200 students at the Save a Student Summit hosted by MCR in Narcan, which is, again, a life-saving opioid reversal tool. So, it's not something that, I'm just here to talk about, but it's something that I've already created actual change on. I push for actual change on, and something that I continue to do in the future. One thing that I want to do is making sure that all MCPS staff and security guards are equipped with Narcan somewhere. alongside that, making sure that we can maybe potentially get safety buttons in bathrooms. I think that's, again, a really important thing that would not just go towards addressing, the fentanyl epidemic or the drug epidemic within our county, but also other, hate incidents that might occur in bathrooms. A lot of times these incidents do end up occurring in bathrooms, and this would be a great way to start mitigating that problem.
So what was the last thing you mentioned?
Are you talking about the safety buttons in bathrooms?
Yeah, I've just never heard of that, so I just wasn't sure what that was.
Yeah, so I think the idea behind this is, the same way we have like the call buttons in classrooms, right? Safety buttons that you can, sort of hit and just be like, hey, like there's an incident happening in the background, in the bathroom. I don't want to have to go talk to a teacher. This is just some sort of like no question to ask, like, hey, like something's happening here. Maybe want to start addressing this. Alongside this, typically it's sort of paired with sort of Narcan in school bathrooms too, but I understand that might be sort of like a bureaucratic struggle to sort of get that in these bathrooms. So I think this is good jumping off point, and we can understand in future years how we can improve upon this system and really make sure that students are being safe within all facets of our school.
Okay, got it. Okay, I only have 3 questions left, and then I'll let Sammy go some. So what do you think should be done to solve our absenteeism issues in MCPS?
Okay, absenteeism issues. This is obviously like a really, really big struggle within MCPS. And I think we need to solve it from the ground up, right? First, we need to look at why students are being absent, right? Are they being absent just because they want to skip class, or are they being absent because, they have to work to provide for their family? Or what is the general reason behind why they're being absent? And that'll give us a big indicator as to why, like, oh, is it just, school's not being disciplined enough, or not having the resources to discipline students? Or is it, that students just can't balance coming off COVID, right? They can't balance that school and that work balance that they might need to in order to provide for their family. And I think that's really important. I think when we're talking about students who just, don't want to come to school for no other reason than that, I think it's important to get students who want to come to school, right? So that means like increasing extracurricular offerings, really encouraging club fairs, and showing students like, yeah, there are reasons to want to be at school. I think on the other side of that, showing students the other ways that they can get involved in the community and make money for their family while still getting, access to high school credits. There's a program that, Sammy, can you help me out here, that Nico's in?
Which one are you talking? Oh, the apprenticeship program?
Apprenticeship program. Yeah,
Yeah.
The word was slipping my mind. But it's a program where students can get paid for the work that they do, and they can also get high school credits for that work. And same with internship opportunities that are paid within MCPS. I think it's a great way to show students like, hey, you can be making money and still getting these high school credits that you guys need to graduate, and really working with students to say, hey, like this is the opportunities that we have in MCPS. At the same time, also pushing more CTE opportunities and other opportunities. I know right now I take virtual classes at MC, so that's like a really big weight off my shoulders. Being able to take those classes on my own time is really, really helpful. And I think there are so many opportunities out there that students just don't know about, and would help solve our problem so much if students had access to these opportunities and knew about these opportunities.
Okay, great. I'm actually going to skip one of my last 2 questions just because I want to make sure we have time for Sammy's. This last one, I know obviously you're running for the student member of the board, but what role do you think parents should have in MCPS related issues?
I think when we're talking about, MCPS, is as much about the parent as it is about the student, right? And so we need to make sure that when through any major decision, parent input and other stakeholder input is really being taken into consideration, right? I think over the past year, the use of testification has become a really, really important tool when talking about, gaining that parent input. And I think it's also, again, important when we're talking about parent input to sort of understand that, they know their students, they know their kids the best, beyond, the teachers that are in the classrooms with them. So it's important to understand that, they have opinions and they have ideas that should be taken seriously. And when we're talking about testifying to the Board of Education, or talking to other talking to other policymakers within MCPS, it's again important to have that sort of input and keep that in the back of our mind when we're making not even the back of our mind, at the forefront of our mind when we're making these decisions to make sure that parents and students are being represented fairly and accurately, and we're doing what's best for the kids in MCPS.
Okay, great, thanks. And I'll hand it over to Sammy for some questions, and I'll wrap up at the end.
Yeah, great. I appreciate those were great questions. I think those were like, thoughts on this, thoughts on that. So I'm gonna kind of move into a little bit of more open-ended questions. And so the first thing is, what do you believe is the most valuable aspect of the MCPS budget? And do you support the items that the board has chosen to maintain in the amendments they introduced to this year's budget?
All right. So I think the most valuable aspect would have to be, teacher salaries, right? I think that's the biggest part of our budget. We have to say that it is the most important aspect because teachers are the people who, make sure our school system keeps running. I think we're having some record-breaking pay increases this year, or scheduled pay increases, if I'm not mistaken. And I think that's something that's, again, really important to consider when we're talking about making sure our teachers are being well paid for. Proposed amendments, I know the county council is, are we talking about the operating budget or are we talking about, capital improvements?
The operating budget.
Okay, operating budget. All right, because I was going to talk about capital improvements for a second because it's like that's a little bit of a iffy situation. I think it's important that I think as of right now, we're making sure that AP and IB tests are still being fully funded within the budget. I think that is again really important, especially when we're considering the fact that we're losing out on like literally hundreds of millions of dollars of ESSER funding from COVID. So, it is important that we have that we're looking at the measures that we're taking from right post COVID, and we're continuing those measures into the future. Something that I've heard personally a lot of pushback on is the implementation of costs in summer school now. Too, I think it's up to like $200 or $300 from when it was once free. And I think this is something that a lot of students relied on to be able to graduate, especially, students taking a little bit more rigorous courses within the actual school year, relying on those the summer periods to be able to take some courses like health or technology. I know I've personally taken health and technology in the summer. So I know a lot of students have had some pushback on that. And I think that is something that we need to look at in the future, seeing how can we make sure our students are not denied these extra academic opportunities that they want, but maybe don't have the resources to get when we're talking about, just beyond credit recovery, students who want to use this to further themselves. I think it's, again, important to make sure that we're giving them the same amount of opportunities.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. And then my next question is, again, a really high level question, which is, what do you believe the function of a board of education member is, and how does it relate to your platform and your goals?
So I will say I believe the function of a student member of the board and a regular board of education member is a little bit different. I would say function of a board of education member is, again, to listen to the stakeholders in the community, right? Listen to the communities that elected them and provide that same input back onto the policy decisions that are happening within MCPS. And it's to serve the students and the parents and all the constituents of Montgomery County fairly, which is why I would say the role of the Board of Education member is. As student member of the board, I think the lines get a little bit wider, right? Like not only do you have to do everything that a Board of Education member does, but also gives you a unique opportunity to connect with students across Montgomery County, right? So when we're talking about being able to, go to their pep rallies, go to their athletic events, their concerts, their theater programs, right? Actually tonight I'm going to Sherwood's Rock and Roll Revival. So something I'm really excited for. But being able to show students that, the things that you do within the county matter, and they can be highlighted at a high level, which is something that the student member of the board is able to do. Is, again, I think, really important beyond just the policy decisions within MCPS. And I think that's something that we really need to consider when electing the next student member of the board, is someone that not only has the ability to create those policy decisions, but also someone who has the ability to connect with students and come to these, athletic events, concerts, theater programs, and other after school activities to show students, I'm here for you, and I understand the work that you're putting in as a student. And I want to, make sure that it's recognized.
Yeah, great point. And on the topic of students, kind of engaging with students, throughout your campaign or throughout your years here at MCPS, what issue do you believe is most important to students, and how would you address that?
Okay. I would say what issue is most important to students. Um, it definitely varies from different points in the county. I've been to schools where they say, hey, like the drug crisis going on within the county is something that we need to address right now. I've been to schools where they say, we just want to see better school lunches, right? And I've been to schools where they say, like, the opportunity gap, like we're not having access to the same courses as other schools within the county. So I think it does vary within different schools, different parts of MCPS. But I'm gonna go over the three ones that I just mentioned real quickly. So I talked about sort of my plan for the fentanyl epidemic and the drug and opioid crisis within MCPS. When we're talking about addressing the opportunity gap, I sort of talked about expanding extracurriculars, but the way I would do that is through the implementation of club specialists at every middle and high school across the county. Doesn't necessarily have to be an entirely new position, just someone that's trained into this position in order to show, hey, this is the person that you can go to when you want to join a club within MCPS or within your school, or when you have something that you're passionate about but you don't know how to get involved. This is a great way to sort of enter. And it's not just at the school-wide level, but also at the county-wide level, because there's a number of different advocacy organizations and county-wide clubs and groups that do a really great job of making sure that student interests are highlighted. And I think beyond just increasing access to course offerings, this is a critical step that we need to take in order to make sure that students have access to opportunities across MCPS. And then school lunches, obviously continue off your work, Sammy, making sure that school lunches are being student taste tested. We're working with the Department of Food and Nutrition Services to make sure that students are receiving the meals that that they deserve. Personally, I'm vegetarian, so I've experienced my fair share of some not so great school lunches, especially when considering vegetarian meals, but also making sure that we have diversity in our school meals as well, right? I think this is a great step to showing that, inclusivity does not only happen in the classroom, but also on our plates, right? Within our school lunches, right? I know just recently Korean barbecue chicken was passed as a new school lunch menu item. And I think that's a really, really great step in order to make sure that, students feel represented, not just in the classroom, which, is a little bit wishy-washy at times too, but also on their plates at school.
Great. And I just have a couple more questions here, and then we can, I guess, wrap up. So, what method of communication would you see yourself utilizing the most as SMOB? And of course, method of communication is kind of open-ended, so you can define that as you will. But basically, what way would you find yourself communicating with students and stakeholders the most if you did become SMOB?
Yeah, so I actually say this in the Meet the Candidates video, but I believe that not one sort of communication is the best for all students, right? We're talking about a lot of middle school students who don't have access to social media. It's not always the best opportunity or idea to sort of connect, to make all your stuff on social media. So big portion of my campaign would be to make sure that I'm reaching out across multiple different platforms, right? Reaching out to schools individually for school visits, reaching out to schools to put things on their school announcements, using school Canvas pages, school emails, the SMOB monthly minute are all really, really important, vital steps that I would take to ensuring communication across the county. But also the utilization of my SMOB advisory cabinet, right? Making sure that I have sub cabinets based in the DCC and NEC to represent students who are often go unheard, and make sure that students across the county are, getting their input heard on different issues. When oftentimes, it can be sort of difficult to make the trek. In going to multiple schools across the county, I've seen the distance from a school like, Springbrook all the way to Clarksburg. And, it's a long distance. And sometimes it's hard for students to make that journey for things like the SMOB advisory council meetings. So maybe having specific meetings at those individual schools in the DCC and NEC to make those opportunities more accessible to students. And beyond that, really publicizing the different opportunities that students have, that MCPS is creating for students. Across all facets of the county, right? Oftentimes we see the same sort of advocacy kids within these different organizations. And I think it's important that we're receiving, greater spectrum of student input in all of these organizations.
Great points. And kind of just a quick follow-up to that. I know you mentioned a whole spectrum of methods of communication.
Mm-hmm.
Which one do you believe is the most effective at communicating? Which one do you believe is the most important out of those that you mentioned?
Okay, so I'd say for high schoolers, it's definitely social media. For middle schoolers, I would say social media does play a key key role in that. But I would also say that school announcements and and a small multi-minute, like if it's shown consistently within classrooms, those are something that's like really, really critical. And again, I think going back to middle schools, sometimes, school visits are really important and crucial at that point, because, at the high school level, everyone's like all over the place, but middle schools, everyone's always all at once and like in the cafeteria or in one spot during lunch. And I think, again, that's like really great time to be able to speak to a large group of students and get their, input on a specific issue. But yeah, I know I kind of gave you a couple different answers there, but I think when we're talking about an issue as complicated as this, definitely has to give a little bit more than a couple.
No, I totally get it. It's a nuanced thing. I just wanted to hear kind of your thought process, and I think you gave a good answer to that. So this is the last question here, kind of narrowing in on, things you said and specifying that in your platform post, you stated you want to, quote, put students over statistics. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I mean, oftentimes we see students, so I actually recently had a conversation with one of my friends and it was talking about how in a lot of these schools where we're putting, lots of magnet students in, we also have a large amount of 504 students who are also being, shipped into those schools, right? So is this the best for the students at all times? No, because sometimes when we're considering the culture that's being created at these schools, it's not always the best. And when we're talking about students over statistics, it means, looking into what would actually make the student population better within the schools, rather than just, using, magnet students to balance out other test scores within the schools. Like, because I think, again, it's important that, when we're talking about students within Montgomery County, that they're given the same opportunities across the county, but also that, we're treating them, we don't just treat them as, test scores to move around from one area to another just to, boost school stats or, make the county look better, but also to make sure that, when we're talking about these students, that they're being given the best opportunity to thrive in a situation that's, the best for them as well. Because again, like I talked about, my friends who were, having to wake up at 5:30 in the morning and then come back to school, back home at like 3:30 in the afternoon, these high school students. And that's if they're not doing any extracurriculars again, right? Is that the best student? Is that the best situation for them to thrive in? I mean, I think that's debatable. And I think it's, again, important to give those students opportunities to have access to resources closer to home, and, really empower students to be able to do things without having to travel across the county in order to do that.
Great. Yeah. And that's it for me. Thank you for your answers. I'm going to turn it over back to Jason.
All right. Thank you, Sammy. Thanks, Praneel. It's really great. And, look forward to possibly, working with you in the future. And, Sammy, like I said, we can continue working on some other stuff the rest of this year. And yeah, so thank you.
All right. Thank you guys so much for having me today. I really appreciate this opportunity. I said this before, but it's this part of the campaign, being able to reach out to people, give people the answer to the questions that they really want to know, that I think is, again, so important when we're talking about running for this countywide position. And I'm just so glad to have been able to given the opportunity to be here today.
Great. Thank you so much, Praneel.
This is like the core of what it means to run for student member of the board, making sure, we're getting the questions that the people want answered, and really listening to the constituents.